Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, can you believe you could actually have quite a busy day at home and in self-isolation? Well, one of the things I tried to do today was cut my hair. You guys like it? It's a new fashion statement. Anyway, here's the thing, guys. I'm going to talk about an old movie I watched years ago. And I'm also going to talk about this virus a little bit toward the end. Something you probably really need to know about this virus. It's really important to know. So, stay tuned and listen toward the end, and I'll talk about that. Anyway, I'm going to talk about a movie called The Trigger Effect. Let's start the charts right here and take a look at this. This was a movie from 1996. And way back then, the world was a different place. This was just science fiction about what would happen if the power went out over a wide area. And if it didn't come back on, if it just stayed out, and the people in that area, even their cell phones would go dead after a while, and they wouldn't know what's going on with the rest of the world. They wouldn't have any connection outside their area. The gas pumps wouldn't work. Cars would run out of gas shortly thereafter. People would be confused, disoriented, and what would happen is they would start to uh, let's call it civil unrest would start to ensue if that condition were to happen. But back then, this was only just a uh, a science fiction. Like it could never happen back then because we had everything. But now things are changing. The world's changing, and now this might not be science fiction anymore at this point in time. Uh, here we have some sort of a crazy virus. It's come out of nowhere. I shouldn't say it's come out of nowhere. It's come out of China, and specifically Wuhan, China. And, there's level 4 biohazard facilities there in Wuhan. Uh, and let's put it this way, it looks very suspicious. Okay, I want to say something about this. I did programs 2 years ago, a year ago, maybe even 3 years ago, where I said it was talking about China and their shoddy goods, and I was saying about China that China is not our friend. Specifically, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is not our friends. They don't. In the shows I did, I was talking about them. I said that they don't. Uh, they want us as their slaves, to be specific. Uh, that's what I said in my shows. And my shows was not favorable the uh, toward the uh, toward the Chinese government, and their plans for world domination. Uh, they call that plan their manifest destiny, where they want to actually take over the entire planet. Uh, and you know how I feel about them now? 10 times worse after what's happened with this virus. 10 times worse. I'm to the point right now. I am so angry about what's happened with this virus. And, this virus has given all of us the shaft. I mean big time, the shaft. Like we've never had the shaft before. And I'm going to tell you what. Now, if I see a product that's made in China, right? Any product that's made in China, I'll pay 10 times more if it says made in America on it. And if I can't find a product, if I can't find the product made in America, and it only says made in China on it, and say it's a pair of shoes, and I can't find a pair of made in America shoes, the only shoes I can find are made in China, I'll go barefoot at this point in time. That's how I feel. That's how strongly I feel about it at this point in time. After what's happened in the past few months with this virus, and all of you guys should sit out there and you should stop and think for a minute of how you're getting the shaft from made in China. Anyway, let's talk about this movie, The Trigger Effect. This was unthinkable back in 1996 when I first watched it, but it got my wheels spinning in my mind, you know. What if the power go out? But back then, the power couldn't go out. I mean, only something really weird would have made the power grid go out. But now, you know, we're facing situations where if the people right now were to lose their heads, you know, with this virus situation and start to, I don't know, maybe rebel against the government because they don't like wait until later in the show and you're going to see the reasons. I'm going to lay out for you the reasons, probably, I'm not going to say for sure, but probably the reasons why the government has put in these orders, these stay-at-home orders and everything else. Okay, and you're going to get this in more detail and you're going to start to understand it better why. They've probably, they know things that you don't know. They can read documents that you can't read. That you're not allowed to read, I should say. And you notice how the Chinese government was the first ones, as soon as they saw this virus, they knew what it was right off the get-go. And you notice how they did all these very strict quarantine measures and everything? That's because there's something about this virus that's very insidious and very dangerous that is the reason why. They don't know this is not the common flu. This virus, if not handled correctly, can be so deadly, so unbelievably deadly to the population if it's not handled correctly. And I think I know the reason why. I mean, I'm not absolutely 100% certain. It's a theory of mine, but I'm going to explain it to you in a few minutes. Right? Okay, so moving on here. This situation with the trigger effect there was a time back then in 1996 where it's just science fiction. But now, you know, if the population were to, I don't know, maybe get into some sort of a civil unrest situation or something where the infrastructure actually gets cut off. In other words, the power gets cut off. That would only make the problem 10 times worse in a particular area or whatever. And, you know, if the lights go out and they don't come back on, and say in big cities or something, you know, we're talking about a horrendous situation here because just the water alone. Let's just focus on the water for a minute, you know. Yeah, the water pressure would stay up in the cities. They got generators and stuff, and they got auxiliary systems to pump water, run off of diesel generators and stuff like that. But, you know, all those pipes are never used in the system, you know. And the grocery, if a city, the power went off for a extended period of time in the cities, the big cities and stuff, what would happen is the people in the cities, they would buy the bottled water out in the stores so quick your eyes couldn't even blink, and the bottled water would be all gone. And then the people that are left in the city would have to rely upon the city water pressure, and they would go to their sink, you know. And after about 4 or 5 days, when they have to turn on those auxiliary pumps to keep the city water pressure up. Those systems, you know, you would notice a brown tinge and a smell to the water. That's what would happen. And if your power's still out in the city and your water's coming out of the tap with a brown tinge to it, you know, and then they put out a boil order, I mean, it's just like everything else. They tell you ahead of time. They say, like, over here in America, they said, oh, yeah, we're prepared for the virus. Oh, we can handle it. It's no problem. We're ready. We're ready. We're ready. And then when it really happens, what happens? Oh, we're out of ventilators. Oh, we're out of face masks. Oh, we're out of tests. Right? Well, it's the same thing with the big city if the power goes out. Oh, we're ready. We got water pressure and everything to last for months. Yeah. But then the water comes out of the taps brown, then they tell you to boil it, and you got no electricity to run your stove. What are you going to do? Are you going to drink it brown? The next thing you know, you got dysentery. Well, if you don't know what dysentery is, you got the runs, basically, right? And you're sick. Maybe you'll even get cholera. And the next thing you know, you get diseases spreading around, maybe like cholera or something, cholera, or something like that, you know? And I mean, it's just one situation descends into another situation, and each time it becomes one step worse until in the end you start to wonder if you'll even survive. Now, if people out there right now might be saying, hey, he's an alarmist, you know? But 3 or 4 months ago, we didn't have nothing to worry about. Now we got big worries about our survival. And it could get a lot worse before it gets better. So now I'm going to get to the point where I'm going to talk about this virus. We're going to talk about something called the virus inoculum and why that's important. Let me explain the inoculum. Viruses are in little particles. They're like a little ball. They're like a little beach ball. You know, if you looked at it under a microscope, and that'd be one virus, like a little beach ball. Well, you know, on a droplet of water, a tiny little droplet that might come out of a person's nose or mouth, that droplet, if it's a really small droplet, would be measured in microns. Roughly 5 microns would be the size of the tiny little droplet, and it might have as many as 16,000 of these virus particles in it. Okay, and that would be a dose that would, in a normal virus, could possibly make you sick. Because what it does, it goes inside your body and then it starts to multiply and replicate. And so at first you wouldn't be sick. It's just a tiny little droplet. You wouldn't even notice it's inside your body. But it starts to replicate and it starts to go through a doubling process. Every so many hours, it doubles. So if you took in 16,000, well, a number of hours would pass, and then it would move to 32,000 inside your body. And that period, while the virus is doubling inside your body, is called the incubation period. When the virus gets sufficient in numbers from doubling inside your body, it completes its incubation, and then it makes you sick. Right? Normally, you become contagious when you get sick. That's with normal viruses. But this virus is different. The big difference with this virus is it's a novel virus. So with a novel virus, your immune system doesn't recognize it anyway, and right away. It doesn't recognize the virus right away as a virus because it's so new to our immune system, because we've never had it before, we have no immunity to it whatsoever, that fewer of these viruses have to get inside your body to actually start to replicate. Whereas with a normal cold virus, you've got to get like a certain amount, like maybe 10,000 of them or whatever, you know, before they start to replicate. And before the virus actually takes hold, if you get less than that amount, your immune system will kick them out. Because you come in contact with viruses every day. And you don't get sick because your immune system recognizes them and kicks them out. Because this is a novel virus, your immune system doesn't recognize it for a number of days. Let's just call that number of days 12 days, okay? Let's say for the first 12 days, your immune system doesn't know what the hell this is, okay? So just one virus could come into your system, and it will start to double into 2, and then 4, and then 8, and 16, 32. That virus that comes in is called the inoculum, okay? So with this virus, let's just say that a very, very small amount, even one virus, can come inside your system and your immune system doesn't know what it is. Not like a regular cold. Regular cold, it would have to get thousands of them before your immune system, before they could build up and colonize your body. But with this virus, let's just say one could come in there and it'll start to replicate. But the virus would have to go through all of those little tiny numbers, like if one of these viruses come in your system, say a car drove by and a guy sneezed, one little virus 100 yards away flew up your nostril, went inside your system, okay? Your immune system doesn't recognize it because it's new. There's no immunity to it whatsoever. Brand new virus. It starts to replicate. First off, it would have to go through all those little numbers, and it would take ages before your immune system before it would represent a threat to your body. Let's put it that way. Before it would get up into the massive amounts of numbers that would make you sick. Well, in that period in time, your immune system starts to look at this virus and say it takes 12 days for your immune system to mount a proper response. Okay? it would be going through that replication process for, say most of those 12 days, the virus. Building in numbers, building in numbers, building in numbers. And your immune system's at the same time watching it and saying, I'm trying to figure out what you are. After a while, your immune system, after about 12 days, your immune system would say, I know what this is. And it would start to have a little fever or whatever. Maybe some very small symptoms that you don't even notice. But it's fighting off the virus because now it knows what it is. Okay? So you're mostly asymptomatic and you don't have a heavy viral load because you got a very small inoculum. You only got one little virus. If you go into a room and there's a guy in there, and you're in there with him for quite a while, he's sneezing and he's got the virus really bad, and he has got a big inoculum, and his body is loaded with viruses, and he's shedding viruses everywhere. You stay in that room for several hours, you don't get a small inoculum in that case. You get millions of these viruses down in your lungs, in your nose, in your ears, in your eyes, everywhere. Okay? And so the virus starts to replicate. But it's altogether different situation than the situation where you just got one of these viruses. Now you got millions of them in you immediately. You're still going to take that full 12, let's say it's 12 days, before your immune system recognizes it. It's still going to take your immune system 12 days, but the virus then's got to jump on you. Man, it's got to jump on you. Because only about 2 or 3 days later, there's going to be billions of those viruses inside your body, and your immune system's still going to take another 10 or 12 or maybe 8 more days for your immune system to mount a good response. But you're in big trouble because now you've got so many of these viruses inside you that your organs are starting to shut down. Your lungs are filling up full of fluid. You're on life support. You're on a ventilator and everything else, but your immune system's still a few days behind before it'll mount a proper response. So everything is reliant upon this inoculum. How big or small an inoculum you get with this virus. Now let's read these articles. It says the virus inoculum volume influences the outcome of influenza A infections in mice. So they gave these mice a 25 micrometer injection of the virus, and the mice lived. Okay? But then they gave the mice twice as much, a 50 micrometer injection of the virus, and all the mice died. Now that's influenza A. Okay? Let's take a look here at the size of the viral inoculum contributes to the outcome in hepatitis B virus infection. So we can see that this virus inoculum is very important, but I think it's even more important with this particular virus. And the reason why is because this virus is a novel virus. It can take a much smaller inoculum. In other words, a much smaller inoculum would be able to travel through the air in a much smaller particle. Maybe even down to one virus, floating for a great distance through the air. But if you catch that one virus, you're going to get such a low inoculum, you're going to become asymptomatic more than likely, because by the time the virus builds up a sufficient load in your system, your immune system has already had a response and it's developing antibodies. Right? And because of that immune system response and developing antibodies, you'll never build up a high load of the viruses in your system. So, you will become an asymptomatic carrier of the virus, very possibly an asymptomatic spreader of the virus. Right? And so if other people come in contact with you, though, they're not going to get a heavy inoculum from an asymptomatic person, more than likely. They're going to get a very small inoculum, and they themselves will become asymptomatic. Okay? But what's the opposite of that? When you get a cluster of people who have got a heavy inoculum, they're going to pass on a heavy inoculum to the people that they come in contact with. And then what you're going to have is you're going to have people out there who are extremely ill and have a heavy inoculum. So the way this virus kind of works is people with low inoculums who are asymptomatic pass the disease on in the same form that they have it. Whereas people that are very ill with this virus and are shedding a lot of the viruses, they pass on a heavy inoculum, and the people that catch it off of them get very sick or ill or die. And if this is true, I'm not sure it is, but it's my theory. If this is true, that means that the people out there, this would explain a lot. This would explain why all these doctors, young doctors, are getting sick and dying, because they're in close contact with the very sick, with the people who are shedding a lot of the virus. This would also explain why this virus is developing in clusters and killing in clusters. In other places, it's spreading through the population and there's very few deaths. This would explain all these features. It would explain these features better than the virus mutating. Because I don't think any of them have proven these mutations. They're saying, oh, the virus is mutated into type A and type B and type C. Well, let's just say they're all wrong, and the virus hasn't mutated at all. Let's just say why they think it's mutating is they're seeing these clusters of people who are dying, and they think, okay, that's mutation A, and then mutation B is where you don't die, and so on. They're trying to figure it out, just like I am. But I think my model works maybe a little bit better. This theory of the inoculum causing these problems. And the reason why is because it's a novel coronavirus. So, if my theory is correct, the governments of Earth have just saved us an awful lot of deaths, because by social distancing, they're ensuring that the people out there don't get a heavy inoculum. Yes, they might still catch the virus, but with a low inoculum and remain more or less asymptomatic or have a very mild case of the virus. Okay? And if they hadn't have put these controls in place, if they had just went willy-nilly and let everybody just kiss one another and hug one another and do everything, right? You would have had clusters breaking out, very deadly clusters breaking out of this virus, whose people's immune system, the virus basically, the only way I can describe it is this virus would what's the word I'm looking for? Ambush the immune system. If you get a heavy inoculum, it ambushes the immune system. And so, heavy inoculum people would spread it with a heavy inoculum because they're shedding so much virus. And if you get into a lot of virus like that, if you're not wearing your face mask, you're not practicing social distancing and stuff, and you get into a heavy dose of this virus, man, you are in big trouble. So with this virus, I would say really avoid people who are sick, and I'm going to think to myself, hey, if the government just went willy-nilly into this and they had not put these controls in place, that we would have probably saw 6% mortality rate on this virus. We would have probably saw another 6 or 7% of the population who would end up with extenuating health circumstances like a deteriorating lung condition, deteriorating kidneys, and kidney failure and everything else. We would see all of these problems, and so the whole total effect would probably be 15% or more of the population. You take a country like the United States with 330 million people, that would represent over 50 million people. Probably 20 million of them would die, and probably the other 20 or 30 million would be completely incapacitated. That's what this virus would have done to us if they hadn't put these controls in place. But because they put these controls in place, the virus has been modified or muted from its killing action, right? And then you got a lot of these people out there who are decrying what the government did and all upset and everything and saying, oh, they shouldn't have done this and shouldn't have done that. Look, the virus is no worse than the flu. They say. And that's only because the government put these controls and measures in place. They should be thanking the government for what they did. rather than being so upset and everything else. And right now we're in a weakened position in the world where the last thing that we would need is some sort of social unrest or the people to actually start to rebel or anything. They're just causing more trouble for the government in an already bad situation. What we need is help to try to get out of this, you know? And, the government is extending that help. They're sending people checks and everything else. Here in Canada, they got something called the CURB program where they're going to send out $2,000 or whatever. And in America, they're sending out $1,200 checks, and they're talking about upping it to $2,000 a month to help everyone get by. To help you when you're in this quarantine. And now that you know about what's happening with this virus, I mean, it's so important that you keep up these measures of social distancing, washing your hands, keeping your face masks on and everything else, so that you'll get a small inoculum, so that you won't end up on a ventilator. And for these people out there that says the virus isn't real, I'm going to tell you something else. They're going to be a dwindling crew, because this virus is going to touch each and every person eventually, very soon. It's touching everybody. It's touching me. It's going to touch you, everybody else. And those people that are saying the virus isn't real, they haven't been touched by the virus yet. It's hit me across the face like a brick. And these people out there say it's not real. They're basically hiding their head in the sand. They don't want to. But they're going to be a dwindling bunch, because eventually it's going to touch some. One of their friends is going to die. They're going to get sick with it, or somebody is going to get extremely ill, maybe in their family or whatever. And then they're going to say, hey, you know what? This virus is real, and it's a threat to all of us. Listen, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next show. Bye-bye.